Thousands of cops deployed to quell public anger during a lockdown, accompanied by widespread food shortages. Well, it's not just food shortages, it's prohibition in terms of being able to bring food in, to distribute it. The logistics are prohibited, as well as going to the store, presuming that they would have anything there. You know, we were told, well, we're only going to lock things down for the non-essential issues. That was just a test. That was part of the preparations. And as we look at what is happening, the place that I just described is the town, China, that I talked about earlier this week, how they were arriving in the dead of night and taking people off to concentration camps because, you know, COVID or Omicron now, the flu. It's a mild version of the flu. As a matter of fact, the death rates, case fatality rates, assuming that people have Omicron, which that is an assumption, by the way. It's always been an assumption. That, as well as Delta, they don't have the genetic sequencing tests that they're applying to all these particular cases to be able to, in reality, distinguish if somebody has a respiratory illness, to distinguish between one strain of this and another. So that's just a projection. But even with that, they're now showing that this flu that has locked down the world for the last 2 years has a case fatality rate that is a third of what it had been. Nevertheless, they persist and they escalate. And so in China, what we've seen is a beta test for lockdown and surveillance from the very beginning. We've seen in Israel that they have offered themselves as lab rats as a beta test for the vaccine. And Australia and Austria are not far behind China. So you have 13 million people in this city left bargaining and bartering for essential food stuff. This is why I had my guest on yesterday who had been a missionary. He'd been in Silicon Valley, working in Silicon Valley. He became a Christian, became a missionary, went to Romania shortly after it had switched and out of the supposedly getting out of the communist regime, and yet it still had a long, long way to go. But he was there as they were having hyperinflation, empty shelves, as he explained yesterday. It's an excellent interview if you haven't seen it. I split it into two parts so that you could see the part about living under these conditions as well as what he learned and what they started doing in that area. He took those lessons and started using them here. As a matter of fact, one thing that he didn't get into, which helps to explain a lot of what happened, he said both he and his wife got very sick while they were in Romania. The reality is that he didn't go into detail with it on the air, but he got thyroid cancer. I'm not sure about his wife. Had to have his thyroid removed because of contaminated food from Russia. You know, he talked about how going into the store, it was completely empty except for an aisle or two that were completely packed with one product, this kind of bluish-gray peas from Russia. And so I guess they were shipping off their radiation-contaminated food to Romania. But anyway, because he got sick with that, he became very careful about what he was eating, and also because he had seen the shortages in Romania. So what we're seeing now in China, it says people's food supplies are now running low because they have locked everybody down. They're unable to access medical care. Wait a minute, didn't we lock down so that we wouldn't affect medical care? You know, we didn't want to overwhelm the hospitals, but now we fire the nurses and the doctors if they don't give the jab, because that's the only thing that matters. This is never about health care. This is never about protecting the hospitals. The first responders, the heroes, the hospitals are all being thrown under the bus because this is about the vaccine. And the vaccine is a bioweapon. And it is also a MacGuffin. You know, the Alfred Hitchcock plot device. You know, the Maltese Falcon, what everybody is chasing, the thing that motivates the characters. That's what the vaccine is. It's a MacGuffin. And so these people are now unable to access medical care. Others have started trading locally in residential compounds to try to eat. Everything is being bartered in Xi'an, said a resident. People are swapping stuff with others in the same building because they no longer have enough food to eat. One person put out in a video clip said people were trading cigarettes and iPhones for bags of rice. He said, we now have a barter system in our residential compound. We had a bag of rice and neighbors wanted to trade a smartphone and a tablet. We have 6 bags of rice in our home, but no vegetables. To contain any civil unrest, civil authorities have deployed about 29,000 police officers to enforce the lockdown, while countless local security guards are preventing people from entering or leaving areas that were designated to be high or medium risk. One video clip that made the rounds on social media showed security guards beating a teenager in the lobby of a building because he went out to buy steamed buns. He says, I was hungry, so I went out to get some mantou. He was heard telling the guards. Then they started beating him, knocked him to the ground, knocked his food to the ground, and continued to beat him. And it went out on social media. Residents were initially told that they would be allowed to send a designated person to buy groceries every other day, but now that has been taken away from them. How were they supposed to survive? Well, they're not. And their response is to just bring in more police, who will act as a private army of madmen to beat people who try to get out and eat. And so these people are starting to barter the food that they have there, but how long is that going to last? Those who make it out to buy supplies are finding that prices have skyrocketed, especially of fresh fruit and vegetables, despite a well-publicized effort by the government and volunteers to bring in fresh produce into the city in large quantities to hand out to beleaguered residents. The vendor who is selling vegetables must be making a fortune, said one man. He said he paid about 40 yuan for 10 peppers. Now, that's about $6.27. He paid that same amount for 6 tomatoes, and he also paid that same amount, $6.27, for 2 cabbages. State media, tightly controlled by the ruling Communist Party, so they're so different from us, right? I mean, we don't have media that is tightly controlled by our government, do we? Reported on a line of trucks hauling a selection of vegetables. They said it's fresh fruit, pork belly, into residential households. So they put that out on social media and they said, all this stuff is just not true. Look, we have a convoy of trucks that's bringing in fresh fruit and pork and other things like that. But the address that was given, unfortunately, on the news report, people looked it up and they found out it was a residential compound for employees of the Provincial People's Congress and the municipal government. So as they starve people, they do a PR campaign showing convoys of food being brought into a residential compound. Their residential compound. This is the epitome of corruption, isn't it? So I said, where can regular people find stuff like that? We can't. According to the provincial government, as they were munching, speaking between eating their rich food, a total of 41,000 police officers have been dispatched to Xi'an to maintain public order. 29,000 of those deployed work in residential compounds. 4,000 are operating traffic roadblocks so nobody can get in or out. A scholar who was there said the government's top priority in times of crisis has been to maintain public order and social stability rather than looking at the needs of ordinary people. Boy, sure I'm glad we don't have a government like that in America or Canada or Australia or Austria or the UK or anywhere else in the world that you see, because we are all turning into China. That's what I said. YouTube didn't like that. Banned that video that was titled 2020, the year the world became China. Yeah, we don't do that. We don't put the government's security ahead of our freedom, ahead of even being able to eat or get medical care, right? National security. National security is not your security. Do you understand that? People look at this and say, oh, national security. We should all want national security, shouldn't we? Well, you pray for the peace of the country that you live in, but understand national security is a Dr. Strangelove term, like continuity of government. It's not about protecting you. It's about protecting them and letting the rest of us die. They've been building up the stability maintenance system ever since 2004, said this scholar. They say there's only 40,000 police officers here, but actually there are many, many more who aren't police, including neighborhood committees and security in charge of buildings. So, they work in that capacity even though they don't have the official title. So they used this total lockdown method on Wuhan last year, yet the rates of fatality and severe disease are both very low. He said, this is a commentator, Hong Daping. I don't know how much longer he's going to be allowed on air saying something like this. He says, I don't think this Xi'an lockdown is about disease prevention. It's more about controlling the population. That is a dangerous truth. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.